Welcome to Cake on Tuesday, where we spotlight the rule breakers, the underdogs who refuse to listen when everyone said it won't work. I'm Elizabeth Bieniuk, and for the next 20 minutes, we're diving into another disruptive innovation story that proves sometimes the craziest ideas change everything. Today's guest is Mark Oden, CEO of BIM Designs Incorporated. He's worked with over 75 construction companies on large commercial projects across semiconductors, biotech, education, healthcare, entertainment, and he took his company on a journey of massive scale, all internally funded growth from 2 people to 70 people, which got you a spot in Inc. magazine's fastest growing companies list. But we're here to talk about something that is a little bit different. I'm super excited about this real talk episode of Cake on Tuesday. We're going to talk about a hard decision that you faced. But first of all, Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, E. It's so great to be with you again. And I remember our days at Cisco. I just always felt so much that I was on the right path every time that I had a conversation with you. You just had this ability to lighten the day and help steer the direction into a positive way. So I always enjoyed working with you, E, back at Cisco. And thank you for having me. I'm so honored.
Oh, thank you for that, Mark. We've always had some great conversations, so I'm happy to bring one to the world this time.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll start with the fact that where you ended up with this company was not quite your original career. And I met you in a very different field doing very different things. Can you talk to us a little bit about the road less traveled and what led you to being the CEO of BIM?
Yeah, thank you so much, E. I have a master's in electrical engineering. I was very much into networking in my teenage and college years, and I felt just incredible that Cisco would extend an offer for internship, and then eventually that became a 10-year career at Cisco. And quite interestingly, Cisco turned me into an entrepreneur. I had the opportunity to work on very innovative projects there, many of them with you, alongside you, and I'm in the collaboration department, and had a great team. I learned so much. Innovation and acquisitions. And I just am so impressed with everything that I learned in the pedigree of Cisco and those around me at Cisco. And I was just constantly put into positions where I could express innovation and change. And really, 10, 15, 20 years later, the whole world is now using these tools that were built back then. So it's just incredible. And shortly after my tenure at Cisco, I was going through a little bit of a period of deciding what's next and what do I do. Very similar to what's now, actually, as a little foreshadowing. But effectively, I bought a house in San Francisco. I started renovating it and started working with the city of San Francisco and started to realize I have so much to learn in this space of construction. And around me in the Bay Area, when I would put myself out there and talk to folks, I realized that I was talking a lot about the experience of construction and renovation I was going through. And it was a very small renovation, 1,300 square feet. But I think the challenge was primarily that it's in San Francisco and there's a lot of safety constraints there and a lot of historical constraints to work with.
Right.
And ultimately, I met the original founder of BIM Designs back in late 2017 or around the 2017 timeframe. And ultimately, I decided to buy into it. I decided to buy into it, because of a lot of the experience I had at Cisco and having worked, with the strategy and planning team and worked through an acquisition with Cisco. And so that really helped provide the courage of saying, I can step into this. And that's one big reason. And the second big reason is I saw when I went to do my due diligence that there was a very, very strong service market fit at the time. I was later going to learn that that's a lot different than a product market fit in terms of scale, but there was a very, very strong service market fit for what the company did. And at a high level, the company took post-architect and post-engineering drawings and concepts and then 3D modeled that to an 1/8 of an inch accuracy. And specifically, BIM Designs worked with union detailers. The detailers were the individuals that did the 3D modeling. And these union detailers, I hadn't come from the space of union. I hadn't known the world of union. I was immediately in awe and in respect with the level of depth and knowledge that these individuals had. The amount of training that they go through is effectively a college degree without calling it a college degree. So I learned that over time, and I was able to work with highly technical people in a whole different field than I came from. So I felt like I was learning a lot from that, and that was drawing me further and further into that business. And And with that service market fit, and then around the start of COVID, there was a huge demand for what our company did. And a lot of companies were de-risking and outsourcing to the service like our company, BIM Designs. And that led to super rapid scale and growth. I sold real estate. I liquidated investments. I invested into the company. I pushed heavily into its success. And I saw that the vision that I had for it was coming true. I wanted it to become effectively the large law firm equivalent of detailing, right? I wanted to have a specialist on hand for any complicated construction. I mean, we worked on casinos and hospitals, hotels, and even extremely complicated semiconductor projects. So it was really, an incredible opportunity to step into an industry I had never worked in before. Didn't have any experience in. Very few people will leave corporate America to enter into a small business, and then even fewer will enter into an industry that they've never tapped into before. So
Sure.
yeah, so it was a really interesting ride. I learned so much. The team around me I wanted them to be industry experts. I wanted them to help me learn. I wanted them to help steer the direction of the company, and the culture and the passion of each individual showed. So it was a really amazing time. And getting back to making that very difficult decision towards the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, I started to realize that a lot of companies were re-risking back up. They had started to understand the remote collaboration element and how, the post-COVID world was now going to be. And what I saw is like over time, the company had needed to decrease in size operationally. And I was trying to see, is that vision of being the largest detailing firm in the US. And I was also working over the past 4 years on potential AI and technology integrations into, how can I help my detailers be more efficient? And that's where I brought the engineering concepts, the tools and lessons, the product management concepts I had learned at Cisco. I was constantly trying to bring that into the service-oriented company as well. And I started to realize that the market was shifting. Unfortunately for the union space, it became much more acceptable to outsource internationally. Because I was a union-based company, I was only using US-based detailers. That was a decision that I had held true to. It was very important for me to hold and respect the relationship with the union. And so it wasn't necessarily something I could certainly not easily pivot to be international non-union.
Sure.
So that was it was almost a contractual limitation that I couldn't move in that region, at least in certain parts of the country. And so it'd be overly complicated to try to separate the nuances of where can I do this, where can't I do this. And it would definitely impact the relationship that I had built with the union. And relationships I've learned through running this business are the single most important element of business. And so I didn't want to damage that. And yeah, I had to come to this critical moment of what's next for the firm. Is it going to help me live the life I want to live? And I spent the first 6 months of 2024 really in a contemplative position, a contemplative mode, obviously still running the company, but on weekends or, any time that I could step away from my day-to-day duties, I would go to a retreat or I would go camping, or I would just do something that would completely take me out of the element of the business and give me the mental space and energy to think about the larger term picture. And I remember thinking about dozens and dozens of variables, dozens and dozens of outcomes and possibilities. Definitely one of the first things I thought about is, AI is here, AI is coming. Am I at the forefront of that in this specific industry? And how is that going to impact, my industry and my company? And am I, in working towards the survival of the business, am I still going to be able to be at that forefront? That was a pretty early conversation I had with myself on that. I worked very closely with my leadership team, who are very committed and dedicated. I feel honored to have had them on my team and working very closely with me to help the success and growth of the company. Each of them put their heart and soul into them, as did every employee of the firm. And I was working with them on, hey, what do the financials look like? What do sales look like? We're going to have are we going to have a strong summer, as they typically are? What is it going to be? Oh, and it's also an election year. An election year, there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of uncertainty. So in the world of construction, I learned through the course of the business that the uncertainty and the chaos actually leads to not as much forward investment.
Yeah.
We're holding on to those checks until that certainty shows up. So I had a lot of these sort of external factors to think about. I had a lot of internal factors to think about. And it showed over month into 2024 that we were performing well, like we were still selling. We just weren't selling to the numbers that we had wanted to grow the business to. And that growth was, as it had been shrinking, it continued to shrink rather than continued to grow. So I was going to have to make some very, very hard decisions. I was going to have to more than likely let go members of the leadership and management team, be much more active on a day-to-day basis, managing the operations of a company that I knew I wasn't the best person to manage the day-to-day operations of, even though I had the electrical engineering degree. I didn't have the construction or technical/union pedigree. And I knew it was the right thing to have those, the right people in place for that. And ultimately, I had to ask myself the question, is the firm and the trajectory of the firm going to help me live the life I want to live? And what I had decided is, given all the variables that I had considered over those 6 months, it wasn't going to help me do that. And I wanted to help release everybody else to ensure that it would help themselves live the life they wanted to live.
So before we get into the details of that, Mark, you hit on several key points here already. I want to take a minute, pause, and go back on, because there's a few key things here I don't want to miss. One being, as the leader, you had to purposefully take time and make space for reflection. Have those head above the trees moments. So that's one key thing I think you pointed out, of you're not just looking at, okay, are we meeting our current week, our current quarter milestones, but where are we going? Am I taking that time and that pause to really look at that? Another key point you made was about relationships. And I love what you said, relationships make the world go round is 100% true. I absolutely believe that in every industry, in every space. So you talk about wanting to prioritize the relationship, but then you also made a third comment about looking at the long-term trajectory of your business and really mapping that against the market and the industry and external factors. And so right there, it's a 1, 2, 3 things that you should be doing as a leader and help lead to this decision. As you're going through that process, I know before we get back to where you ended up, as you're going through that process, what was sort of the mental journey as you're realizing and having those times of reflection of, okay, I think a change is coming? What was your process to sort of mentally prepare yourself before you were able to then go back to the team and talk them through it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think, for example, giving myself a lot of time to reflect, as you mentioned. So yoga has been very important in my life. At that time, I was probably taking 2 to 3 hours a day with yoga. And so that was a lot of internal time to think, but also embodiment and connect to myself, my body. Went several times to a retreat called Camp Ernest. It's in Northern California, close to Yosemite. The couple there that runs that retreat are just so lovely and accepting, and everything is in abundance with them. So I was sort of flipping things upside down for me, right? Where I was coming from scarcity, I was entering into abundance. And, it sort of gave me a new, just always a different perspective and always a different way to look at things. And just, journaling where I could and constantly asking myself a dozen questions. On top of, I had worked very closely with my internal leadership team. They were my closest advisors and my confidants. I worked very closely with an outside financial firm that was helping me, say, hey, these are the goals that you want to hit financially. I was working with outside legal counsel to say, hey, what guardrails do I need to stay within as I'm making this decision? So I worked with many different advisors. I worked with an executive coach I have for the last 7 years. And, so it wasn't solely, my world, my internal world. I was absolutely working with lots of people that I had built trust and relationship with to make that decision.
Absolutely. Makes sense. And then once you did make a decision and had a course of action, how was that with approaching your team? This is obviously, you're talking about people's livelihoods. You're talking about a community that you've built. Yeah. How did you approach that?
Yeah, I often, and I felt this way deeply, I often referred to my team as the BDI family, BDI for BIM Designs, Inc. And so that was often how I addressed the larger organization. And, everybody might have different views on, addressing the team as family. And I really felt that way. And once I made the decision, it was definitely about how do I gracefully and honorably execute this decision. The first thing I did is notify the leadership team that the decision was made. And, how much I appreciated them helping me get to that point. The clarity was there, especially after the sales misses. And either that afternoon or the next day, I started calling my clients that we were under contract with. And I said, hey, I'm not able to get you to the finish line on this. And I want to get you to a transition point. I can't commit that, unfortunately, because I need my team behind me to commit that. But would
Mhm.
you be able to look into what is a decent, realistic transition point in the next 2 to 4 weeks to help you be as successful as possible, even though I can't get you to the finish line? And that was a hard conversation
I can
with our
imagine.
clients. And yet each of them really appreciated it. They really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And they had gotten back to me by the next morning, which is when I asked of what the transition point would be. That night, I had prepared a speech for the company. So I spent time, typing all the thoughts that I had and all the memories that I had and how grateful I was for, 70 plus employees at its peak, but, probably well over 100. I haven't done the math, but it's well over 100 who, went through the company, or maybe 150 over the course of the 6+ years. And I had an all hands the next morning and worked through the speech, and I was an emotional mess. I cried, I sniffled, it was the end of an era. It was a disbanding of the family. And that was very difficult for me. And I had an ask for the team, and I said, you'll be receiving a call after this from your manager. The manager will be asking you to stay through a certain date. That date is to help the client with their successful transition. Completely up to you. I just ask if you would consider staying for, through that date.
Mhm.
And on the operations side, I had 100% commitment to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was huge for me. So
I was going to ask if there's any surprising response to your very authentic and raw appeal to the company. Well, that might be it right there.
yeah.
100% commitment is pretty impressive. Obviously, you built a culture there.
Yeah, thank you. I was stunned and impressed. Yeah, absolutely. And that strikes me deep in the culture that has been built and the family that had been built, and for the team to say, yes, we'll help you with this transition. And following, I had phone calls with our clients asking them, can we transition these employees to your company? And actually, once we had finalized the operational wind down, 100% of the employees that wanted to transition either transitioned directly to that other company or had another job. So, that was also a big win for the wind down. If I have to make a decision, a very difficult decision, I at least want to do it well.
Right. I feel like there might have to be a part 2 episode of this, Mark, because there's a lot we could go into this. If you are sending a message, though, to someone else who might be facing a difficult decision like this with their company, with their baby, with their family,
Yeah.
what is a piece of advice you would give somebody who knows there could be some hard conversations ahead?
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I love this question, and it's a real big point I want to make. For those first 6 months in 2024, I was in fear. I was in fear of rejection. I was in fear of failure. I was in fear of missed acknowledgments. I was in fear. And that made making the decision very difficult. Once I had the clarity of the decision, once I made the decision, I felt a lightness to me. And I had a path forward that I could execute on gracefully and honorably. And so that fear is nascent and it's to be acknowledged. And the world continues after that. Life continues after that decision. And had I known that, I might have been able to face that fear a lot sooner. And I'm so grateful that I did go through that experience of the last 6 years and, of that 6 months of fear, because now I'm not scared anymore. I faced it. I've done it. I've seen what what the outcome is.
What's on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for anybody facing that, A, you're not alone. And B, fear is okay.
So, Mark, final question. If people want to learn more about you, your journey, are you going to be writing about this, talking about this more? What's next for you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, maybe I can sit with you later and we can talk about what it's like to write
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, sure. We could do that.
Yeah. And I related heavily to it. Thank you so much for it. But yeah, people are welcome to find me on LinkedIn /in/MA or, search for Mark Oden, BIM Designs, and they'll be able to find me. Be more than happy to sit with anybody going through this type of decision. And if I can help anybody through it, I think that would be, one way I can help make the world a better place. And I'd love to do that.
It's a perfect note to end on. All right. We'll keep that in mind for those facing this journey. Mark has some good wisdom from the other side. We'll have to talk about that book. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here and being so raw, authentic, and open.
Thank you, E, so much.
Thanks for joining another Cake on Tuesday celebration of beautiful disruption. Please share it, review it, and find more innovative stories at podcast.cakeontuesday.com. I'm Elizabeth Bienik. Be bold, stay curious. Now go have some cake.